Have you ever heard that immersion is the best way to learn a language? Have you ever thought, man, the only reason why I could never learn is that I've just never left the country. So how could I ever really learn a language? Is that really true? Is immersion really the best way or the only way to learn another language? I have to tell you that I love immersion. I learned both Portuguese and Spanish through immersion by living in countries that spoke both Spanish and then Portuguese. So for me, it worked very well. But I also know that it wasn't just the immersion that allowed me to learn those languages. Think for just a minute if you know people who've lived here in Brazil that don't speak Portuguese very well. Maybe they've lived here for 20 years and they still don't speak very well. If you're in the US, maybe you know people who've lived in the US for 20, 30 years and still don't speak English very well. Why is that? I by no means want to say that learning a language is easy. Actually, it's not easy. And that's the point. Just because you live in a place where everybody speaks a language doesn't mean that you necessarily will learn the language. I know lots of people here in Brazil that have lived here for many years that don't really speak Portuguese very well. And lots of people in the United States that have lived there for many years and don't speak English very well. I think there are many reasons for that, and I won't say that there's one reason. But what I do want to talk about is what I think some of those reasons are and how immersion can work and why it sometimes doesn't work, and how some of the same things that work in immersion can work in other ways. I talked last week about prepare and the integrative language coaching methodology. I talked about how it really brings together all the parts of language and all the parts of who we are and brings them together so that we can understand them and understand how they work together so that they can work together in the best way possible. Also, integrative language coaching for me is about understanding the different levels of communication. Many people that I respect so much talk about different levels of communication. And there are many different levels. But today I want to talk about intrapersonal communication, how we talk with ourselves, and interpersonal communication, how we talk to other people. There's also other levels of communication for sure. But what I think is when we're talking usually about learning another language, we're usually very focused on interpersonal communication, how we talk to other people, how we understand other people. But I don't think we talk very much about how we talk to ourselves about that language. What is our internal dialogue about learning a language, about speaking? I think a lot of what makes immersion and other forms of learning so powerful and so effective, and vice versa, and the opposite, is that intra-communication, how we speak to ourselves about learning, about our abilities to learn, and about what it is we want. For sure, I think that immersion is an amazing opportunity. As I said, for me it was amazing because if you go to a country where you want to learn their language, you're surrounded by so many people speaking that language. So it's an amazing opportunity. Just going to the grocery store, sitting down on the bus, anything you do can be a learning opportunity and an amazing learning opportunity if you take advantage of it. Because living in another place, you have all of these amazing opportunities. But it doesn't mean that you necessarily will or have to take advantage of them. I don't know if you know somebody. Think if you know somebody who's lived abroad, traveled abroad to learn another language, or maybe to study in general, and they lived abroad for 6 months, a year, who knows? Yet they weren't really able to improve their language skills that much. Do you know someone like that? I know lots of people like that. I think a lot of times we go abroad and we find ourselves in these international communities where lots of people speak our native language. I know when I was in Guatemala, the school I studied at was, oh my gosh, it was really intense because it was 5 hours a day. And I also lived with the family when I was at that school. And then I traveled all around the country, and I also traveled to Chiapas, Mexico. But I was also surrounded by tons of people from the UK, from the US, people from the Netherlands, tons of people who spoke English. And it would have been very easy for me to have spent most of my time, a lot of my time outside of class, speaking English. But I didn't. I realize now, looking back at what I did and what I think I did differently than some people, was that I made a really clear decision. Actually, when I decided to go there, I decided that my goal was to speak Spanish. I didn't think it would be cool to speak Spanish. No, I really, really wanted to speak Spanish. I really wanted to be able to talk to the people in the countries I was in. And I wanted to be able to communicate and work. And I knew that I wanted to work in Spanish when I returned to the US. So for me, it was super important. So wherever I went, I spoke Spanish. I spoke Spanish to my family. I spoke Spanish to everybody I saw on the street. And I even spoke Spanish to the people I met who spoke English. And I would ask them, please, can we please speak Spanish? Because my goal wasn't, I loved making friends. I made some amazing friends that are still my friends to this day that I love very much. But my goal, my biggest goal, was to learn Spanish. So I didn't want to spend my time speaking English. I was there. I was in this place where I had this amazing opportunity. So I wanted to take full advantage of it and speak Spanish as much as possible. Same with in Brazil. I had so many opportunities. I've had so many opportunities over these last 10 years to speak English. Actually, over the past few years, I've been speaking a lot of English. More English than I actually would like to speak. But the first few years I was here, I barely ever spoke English because I knew my goal was to speak Portuguese. I needed to speak Portuguese to do the work I was doing at that time, but I also wanted to speak Portuguese to be able to work in general and to meet people, to talk with people, and to learn the language. So I didn't even meet any people who spoke English for a long time. Actually, only years later, after living in Brazil for quite a while, did I seek out the expat community. Because at that time I was missing speaking English with native speakers, and I was missing community and different things. So it was important for me at that time. But really, for a lot of years, I didn't. And I still have a practice that when I'm talking with a Brazilian, for example, that even if they speak English, I speak in Portuguese. So, of course, when I teach English, I speak in English. But if I'm not teaching in English, I speak in Portuguese. Because my goal is to improve my Portuguese and it's to become better. And for me, it's an extra goal. Not only am I talking, but I'm also improving my Portuguese. So it's a practice that I make, and it's a conscious choice that I've made to learn. So I think that that's the key. I think that that's the key, whether it's immersion or another type of learning. I want you to think again, if you know someone who has learned English, for example, playing video games, maybe playing guitar or programming. I know a lot of people who speak really well in English, and mainly they learn from playing video games. Playing video games, they were required to speak English because the video games were in English. The community, a lot of role-playing games, there was a community back and forth, conversations. They were listening to English, speaking in English, reading in English, even writing in English. And it's not crazy to understand why they ended up learning English. And same with people, I know a lot of musicians that speak really well in English, because for them to understand the music, to be able to play the music that they want to play, they need to speak English so that they can understand the music, pronounce the music, talk with other musicians in English, go on tour in English-speaking countries, etc. And so they've learned the English through music, or maybe programmers. In order to program, you need to know English because that world is very English-based. So it makes sense that those people have actually learned because they needed to learn. So I want to think about that. I would like to ask you to think about that. I know this is a very polemic question. It's a super polemic question. And I don't want to say that some people are lazy or anything. That's not what I'm saying. I want to talk about the idea of intention. The idea of how much you really want to do something. About how much focus and how much practice you put in to learning something. And how much real desire you have to learn something. Because I really do believe that that makes a big, big difference. And so if you are going to be immersed in another culture where they speak another language, you have the choice to really take advantage of all of those opportunities and speak the language and listen to the language as much as possible, or not. And same with right here. I'm in Brazil now, but if you're in the US, it works the same. You can focus on where you are, or you can take advantage of this amazing world we live in now that has so many resources online, so many opportunities. We have so many opportunities nowadays to hear and listen and speak with people from other countries. And so the question I really want to ask you is it really immersion that's stopping you? Or could it be maybe some of those questions about language, maybe some of those thoughts about language that are in your head? What do you say about language? Are the thoughts that you have about language helping you or hurting your learning process? It's difficult to look inside often. That intra-communication, what we say to ourselves, we often don't even think about it. But I think that it is crucial and critical to language learning. And I would love to have you take this challenge to think about it. And I would love to hear your ideas. If you have lived abroad and you've learned through immersion, please tell me, how did you do that? And if you did it, why do you think that didn't work for you? And if you haven't ever left your home country, but you've been able to learn, how do you think you were able to do that? And if you're struggling and you think it's because you haven't been able to leave your home country, because you haven't been able to live abroad, to think about that. Is that truly the case? I don't know the exact answers to any of these questions, but what I do know is that it's incredibly important for us to ask questions and to ask hard questions of ourselves. If we really want to grow, and if we really want to reach our goals. And so if your goal is to learn another language, what are you saying to yourself about it? And if you do choose to go take an incredible journey into immersion, are you doing everything that you can to take the best advantage of that opportunity? Are you saying to yourself things that will make that opportunity better? Are you saying the things that will help you to learn and to make that immersion process incredibly rich? I've spoken much more than I wanted to speak today, but I'm just so passionate about this idea, and I'm so passionate about this topic that it's so hard for me to stop, but I must stop now, and I will, and say thank you so much for listening to me today. It's such a pleasure always to talk to you, and I hope this was interesting and served you, and I'd love to hear your comments, and until next week, much light, much love, all the very best this world has to offer to you, and have a wonderful day. Ciao, ciao.